Hello again, everyone, and Happy New Year. This is Ken Kibler, the Director of Client Profitability with eTruckBiz. We're just shy of the top of the hour, and the attendee list is still growing. So if everybody can sit tight for another minute or so, we will get going with our first weekly webinar of 2024. Thank you very much. All righty, it looks like the attendee list has leveled off. Once again, Happy New Year. Welcome to 2024 and eTruck's first session of our Tuesday webinar. Uh, Hopefully, we can add some knowledge to your business and make 2024 extremely profitable and successful for you. So, without further ado, I will turn this over to Jeff Walzak.
Hey, thanks, Mr. Ken. And as always, we need to make sure everybody knows that eTruckBiz is not endorsed, sponsored, approved, or otherwise affiliated with FedEx Ground. All right, so a lot of folks want to know how we did for peak. Let's take a look. Let's look at how we did this year and try to compare it to 2022. So keep in mind, now look at if you look at this trend line for since last peak, the trend line definitely was on the move up the entire year actually, but you've got the different ups and downs based on peak. So you look at last year on the vans, peak wasn't all that great. This year, kind of the same thing. Didn't see too much of the volume on the pickup side on vans. Packages, kind of the same thing. Now you did pick up more packages per stop. That's good, but the stops didn't necessarily fall in there. But if you look at let's see here. Technical difficulty. Why? On the delivery side, you can definitely see delivery stops. You can see where peak was last year and how peak was this year. So a lot of folks said, well, there wasn't really a peak. It was there. It wasn't what was forecast, but there was a peak. If you look at last year versus this year, it was a little more shallow this year than it was in last year. So, and then on the package side, same thing. So, but every year here, something seems to happen. If you look at stops per dispatch, last year, look how, we're at 100, and under 105. Oh, it's so hard. We can't put any more stops on the trucks. Well, during peak, somehow we figure out how to do it. And possible productivity gains become possible during peak for some reason. Look how many stops per dispatch can be handled. Right? You want to say something about that, Ken?
Yeah, so you're saying it peaked at almost 118 stops per driver dispatch. Is that what we're seeing there on that graph?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. And that is fantastic. And as Jeff said, your drivers probably thought it was impossible. Your VCs probably thought it was impossible. It really isn't when the package cube gets smaller. Your drivers start to deliver the truck in the order that it's loaded will also help. Therefore, they don't have to walk through the entire truck delivering from section 1000 back to 6000, back up to 2000. So all of these things are possible, and it's made possible with density. Remember, the denser your routes are, the more stops per hour your driver can do, and also the more that the drivers can be on the road. So that 118 is a very, very good number. Can it be maintained throughout the year? If you push it, it probably can.
It's going to be the key to everything coming up here shortly. All right, so here we are, 2024. And leading off, this is going to be the year of significant change. It's finally here. It's about to start happening. You could say, well, every year has been a year of significant change. Well, 2024, it's about to happen. And then another catalyst for change, I want to know, or what we want to do is we want to point something out that just recently happened. FedEx stock falls after earnings miss, and it cut its revenue outlook. So here we are missing the numbers again. Shares in FedEx plunged. This was 4 weeks ago during the earnings call. But anyways, shares in FedEx plunged more than 9% after hours as the package delivery giant fell short of analyst estimates on quarterly profit and revenue and cut its full year revenue outlook. So the key there is cut its full rest of this fiscal year's revenue outlook. Let's see here. So there's something wrong with the stock price again, and they've already said what the fix is. So FedEx remains on track with its restructuring plan and added that the company is redesigning its air network to accommodate changes in demand. The company has been working on initiatives, including combining its ground and express units as part of a restructuring plan to cut costs. Right? The express unit has been a drag on FedEx's results as customers, including the U.S. Postal Service, shift to more economical shipping alternatives. Right? So Wall Street likes the plan, right? But the problem is it's taken too long. So here's some more information. FedEx was the S&P's 500's worst performer today. That was on December 20th. That was before Christmas. Here's what analysts say it's running into problems despite efforts to cut billions in costs, right? If you see the little caption there, more patience is needed for a turnaround in FedEx's express business, well, the analyst said. So FedEx Corp was the S&P's worst performer on that particular Wednesday after the package deliverer a day earlier trimmed its sales forecast. As Wall Street picked apart the financials, many analysts, while still praising the company overall and its efforts to slash billions of dollars in costs, signaled out FedEx's large air and ground express segment as the source of the company's troubles. Okay, so down here it says the primary driver of the bottom line miss continued to be the impact of severe macro headwinds on express volumes and revenue, and the inability of FedEx to move the cost needle as quickly in that segment. That's what we just said. Wall Street's growing impatient. Well, so I don't know that it's a big secret to anybody anymore that FedEx is going to combine the express and ground operations into ground, right? We already knew that. It's called Network 2.0. If you've been coming to this webinar for sure, you know about this, but pretty much everybody knows about this now. All right, well, did you know that there's something else going on? This is yesterday in FreightWaves. FedEx braces for a 50% cut in postal service, in its postal service air contract. Now, a lot of people may or may not know, but most people don't know that FedEx hauls a bunch of postal service, especially the air or expedited services that they might have. If the postal service takes 50% off of FedEx's planes, Mr. Kibler, what does that mean?
There's a lot of empty space on a plane that is not generating any revenue. Therefore, their revenue per dispatch is decreasing.
That's right. And what's the good thing about that revenue? So it's not something they have to go out there and sell and try to get another customer or whatever. It's the postal service. They were buying a certain amount of capacity on those planes. So this is a big deal. And this will further add to the financial problems at Express. That's the point, right? All right, so what does all this mean? Investors want to know how and when FedEx is going to fix the little investment problem, the stock price, the return on the investment. How are they going to fix that? CSPs want to know what all this means to them, right? Well, all signs are now pointing to the need for FedEx to accelerate the Network 2.0 process. Some of you that are on here know that sometimes we know a few things and we hear a few things, and we can tell you for sure that this is something that's about to happen. So a lot of people would say, well, so what? What does that mean? I don't care. Well, there's a little problem with accelerating the Express integration. A lot of folks, if you understand it, you want it to come, but there's still a little problem here. You might recall that Wall Street had its doubts as to whether or not CSPs are capable of transforming their businesses to handle the time definites. If you recall, there was analysts from the street that openly said it. We don't know that the contractors can adjust to the demands or the different things that are going to happen in handling time definites. So to handle them, it largely depends on two things: accurately monitoring and holding drivers accountable to time definite deadlines, right? And fully utilizing available resources during regular operational hours. Now, can our regular operational hours from 9 to 1? Or
There are some drivers that would like you to think so.
is it from 8 to 2?
Nope. A little bit later than that.
So keeping the trucks on the road for a full operational day is going to be key to making this happen, right?
And
just for fun. Go ahead.
And it's proven to be profitable for the drivers. We've seen some customers really expand their stops per driver day by keeping their trucks out there longer. So,
and you've seen that, right? So you've actually been involved with some folks that, and it's not even all the time definites yet. It's just a small percentage, 20 to 25% of what they're going to end up seeing when most of it all comes over from Express, right? What's been the experience so far of the folks doing it?
we've seen customers that were struggling financially, no doubt about it, increase their revenue and their stops by almost 20%, and they've been able to capture that productivity. They've gone from 70 stops per driver day with the drivers on the road under 5 hours, and have moved the needle with the drivers staying out there longer, pushed them to 8.5 hours a day, staying out past 5 o'clock, and reached a goal of 140 stops per dispatch. So can be done. Did they have to add uh, some resources to get the 1030s off because of a tight window? Absolutely, but not 20% more drivers by any stretch of the imagination. Otherwise, they wouldn't have realized significant, almost over 50 stops per driver day gains. And, and back in when they were doing 70, oh, they can't fit anymore. They can't fit anymore. Well, lo and behold, they're fitting more on the trucks.
So in general, would you say it's been good for the CSPs that are?
Absolutely. I think it's been very positive to the contractors, not without its challenges, no doubt about it. Sometimes it's a little bit later dispatch, and they've got to do some planning, and then they have to make some adjustments in the morning, and then they have to follow up with the tools that are available to make sure that the drivers understand that those 10:30 and noon deliveries have to be made first. So the drivers had to understand the culture, and it had to be communicated to them. And then the CSPs had to manage to make sure that the drivers were doing what needed to be done. And some of them have earned significant bonuses, as well as increasing the revenue and the stop capacity by 20%.
General, it turns out to be a good thing, but kind of getting ahead of ourselves. So FedEx has to make a few changes, right? They're going to try to have folks do a few things. And at the heart of making both of those things happen that we just talked about is, as we've been preaching for a while now, changing the culture. One of the main culture issues right now is what needs to happen is those trucks need to stay out there. And in order to have that happen, we got to change the culture from paying by the day to paying by the hour. And I know a bunch of folks on here would say, oh, whoa, we can't do that. Oh, no, no, that can't happen. Well, here's the deal. Again, we just said you've heard us preach about this for many years, but FedEx is going to have to make this happen now. So how are they going to do that? Word is, and some of you that are on here may have already gotten your notice, but there's about to be what best way to describe it is massive payroll audits. And I don't know if anybody's already on here, if you've are facing one already, got your notice already this year, maybe raise your hand and say, hey, I got one of those too. There's probably some, I'm sure. They're setting out to make it easier for you to make it easier to pay by the hour rather than pay by the day. They want to make it a hassle to pay by the day. There's a lot of reasons. It's not just because they got to get the trucks on the road, but as I think we saw this morning, the Department of Labor, the FSLA issue is reared its head again. So who knows? They might have done that on purpose to try to make this happen. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, if most of you know, we have a very, very, very experienced expert staff of folks that do some of you guys that are on here. We help administer your payroll process for you, and what that ultimately does is helps you to pass payroll audit. So hopefully, if she's on here, maybe Seneca can take us through what actually happens during a payroll audit. A lot of you have been through this already. That's great, but some people may have not. We just want to make sure that you're ready for it because it's about to happen to everybody here very soon.
Hello, everyone.
There you go.
Okay, so the initial notification that you will receive is through your MyGroundBiz, through the message center. It will be a letter saying that you're going through a payroll audit. And in that letter will be a list of items that FedEx is requesting as part of the audit. There's, at this time, it seems to be about 10 items that they're requesting. And you get about 2 weeks to gather this information. It can be very time consuming. And as Jeff mentioned, if you are our payroll customer, we do this part for you since we have all your payroll records. And redact any Social Security numbers, make sure that everything is in order. So then when that documentation has been submitted, FedEx will review it, and typically then they come back and ask for additional information or clarification. And then after that step, they would determine whether or not you were compliant. And typically when someone is not compliant, what we see is the opportunity to cure. So again, this is part of the letter you would receive, and it's referring to the part of your agreement that you signed and agreed to that allows them to request this information.
That's what I wanted to point out here is not necessarily this process, not necessarily spelled out in your contract, but it is part of section 1.3 and 6.2G. There's a couple other ones, but those are the main ones.
And then we're just going to go through the list briefly. So the first item is W-2s. And again, the Social Security numbers on those need to be redacted, which can be a little time consuming depending how many you have. You shouldn't have any 1099s. Maybe on a rare occasion if you had someone consulting for you, but number 2 shouldn't be an issue. And then payroll records, they're going back a full year, and then at this point, 2023 would also be a full year. Here's a tough one for some people who do not keep time records. They want your timekeeping data. So the most recent 4 weeks, so that it has to be independent outside of the weekly service worksheet. It needs to be a separate timekeeping system, like eTruck timekeeper.
Right. So can they just take the times off of the WSW, DSW?
No.
Scanner times?
No, because you're submitting the record. So you have to have, a record that shows the clock in time and the clock out time for that person each day.
What happens if you don't have that stuff? You make it up?
Well, you shouldn't. No, I don't think that's a solution. What will ultimately happen is you'll get an opportunity to cure on that.
What happens if you make it up and they figure out you make it up? You made it up.
I think you're in some legal trouble at that point.
Yep. Okay.
Not just losing your contract, but it could go a little further if you're being fraudulent.
See here. We go.
And again, pay stubs for the last pay period.
Oops.
And then they want your quarterly reports for, at this point, it would be for 2 full years. And then any state quarterly tax filings for unemployment. And then there's a couple questionnaires that they are asking you to complete as well. One is a compliance questionnaire, and it asks a bit about your pay period. Do you pay overtime? How do you pay? And then the other questionnaire is regarding safety. So if you are an eTruck customer, our safety program is 100% compliant, so you would be good there. And again, if you're a payroll customer, we help you with the compliance questionnaire regarding your pay. So also our gross pay calculator would help you make sure that you're being compliant in the way you're paying your employees and making sure that they're getting the accurate amount of overtime. So basically all this information FedEx is gathering, they're going to compare to the data they have from the weekly service worksheet. When they see somebody on the weekly service worksheet, they're going to compare that to your time records, make sure that they were paid for the right amount of time, make sure that they were paid. You know, some people we've seen pay people with Cash App and that never goes on payroll, so they're going to ding them for that. There's various things they'll come back with, questions, but the most common are somebody's missing off of payroll, somebody's not being paid minimum wage, somebody's not being paid overtime. Those are the most common that we see.
So it's interesting on here is as part of what they send you initially, it talks about required documents, stuff like that. And then it says this documentation is being reviewed for the purpose of determining contractual compliance with service providers agreement and FedEx ground. The information we kept confidential, it's great. And it says, however, if the service provider is not compliant, certain information may need to be reviewed by others during the termination process. Isn't that nice? Just reminding you that they're serious here, I guess. So what's the solution, right? How do I fix this? How do I not get in trouble here?
I'd say
Seneca
at
said,
minimum,
oops, go ahead.
Yeah. At minimum, we would recommend using our gross pay calculator. If you're paying a daily rate, you want to make sure that you're paying overtime for drivers who are in a vehicle under 10,000 pounds, and that requires an additional calculation if they work overtime. So, you know, that flat rate isn't going to cut it when you get an audit if somebody worked overtime and was in a vehicle under 10,000 pounds or less, even one day that week, in a week. So, you know, we would help you with this. So being a payroll customer would give you that extra set of compliance or help with compliance. And then, as Jeff noted, the white glove services, now you've got, you know, a budgeted amount to combine services that we provide, and it would save you money in the end, as well as lightening your load so that you can focus on your business.
Okay, so it's the bottom line is it's very helpful to have, especially our help for you to get through a payroll audit, is it not?
Absolutely. These can be like very time consuming. Like I said, just gathering the information, making sure you have everything on that list, redacting social security numbers. And then when they come back and want specific information about one employee or what day they worked, you know, we would help gather that information as well, since it is very time consuming.
Okay, so whoop, I keep going backward. So the bottom line is they're about to try to start changing behavior. And this one's a big one for the folks. They don't, just gonna say it the way it is. They don't want you paying folks by the day. It's just trouble in a lot of ways. Okay. Time for questions, discussion.
I have one.
Oh, go ahead.
Going
Yes,
back to if a contractor does end up getting a letter to cure because of failing their payroll audit, what are some of the consequences that they could face? And I'm asking, you know, Seneca, we know this from our personal experience on customers. What kind of actions has FedEx taken with those people?
Well, in recent occurrences we've seen that them require the contractor to use either Paychex or ADP as part of an OTC program that was developed, which is a huge cost to the contractor. We've seen, at least compared to our pricing, Paychex can be as much as 4 times as much for the same type of service, or actually less, because just using these services, they're not helping you make sure that you're paying the overtime correctly. They're just providing you with the software to enter it. So it's a huge cost financially to the contractors when they have to use one of these services.
And isn't it true that they're more or less roped into a, 2-3 year contract with these outrageous payroll services?
It's not even just the length of your contract. As long as you're a CSP, up to 3 years, you need to use either Paychex or ADP, whoever they would choose to go with. So yeah, you're roped into this contract. It's a huge financial burden. And truthfully, from our experience, it's really not helping the contractor with any making sure that they are compliant. It's just another software program that they have to enter their data into without really any guidance.
Okay. Is that it?
And I wanted to point out one more thing about daily pay. So when you're paying somebody daily, there should be 2 calculations that you do every single week. And that is making sure that they're being paid minimum wage. So you're taking that gross pay and dividing it by the hours worked, making sure that they're making minimum wage. The second is that OT calculation, which is a little bit more complicated. So you take your total wages, divide it by the hours worked, any bonuses, and you come up with a regular rate of pay, and then that regular rate of pay is how you calculate the overtime. Luckily, our gross pay calculator does that for you, so you don't have to have this huge mathematical formula. We do that for you to ensure that that overtime is accurate.
All righty. One of the first questions
And easier.
Go ahead.
I'd say one more thing, and even easier, if you're paying hourly, it's almost a no-brainer on how to calculate the overtime. It's very, very much a simpler process by paying hourly. So that is why we're thinking that FedEx would like you to be hourly, not just to fully utilize your resources, but you're going to be more compliant with these overtime issues that we're seeing.
Some very good points, and it's FedEx is going to force these changes because they have to. That they've been sued to oblivion, so this isn't something that they're just doing because they want to make life more painful for the contractor. They've got to do this so that they are not part of a lawsuit for unpaid overtime. Correct, Jeff?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So we'll transition to some of the questions here. It says, I've spoken with CSPs in the Mountain West who received a higher amount for time-sensitive deliveries on one of their contracts and another very rural contract where they did not. Have you heard of many CSPs that do not receive extra for time-sensitive deliveries? I can go ahead and answer that one. You have 2 different levels of what's considered time definite, I guess. You have the 10:30 a.m.s and the noons. To go along with the noon, you also have a second day air by noon option. Those are the ones that we are seeing CSPs being paid for in an additional amount. And it's a contract by contract basis, as well as you must achieve 98.5 service for those products. And it's what's happened is we see that the FedEx sends the CSP a message in the message center. You confirm that you did achieve that, and then you are paid, and you are paid 2 weeks in the rear. So there is a delay in the processing. As far as it being written into a normal contract, we had a customer tell us yesterday that he asked the region why it wasn't being included into a contract that he's looking to, that he was offered, and why that express volume wasn't included. They said, we can't include that right now in the contracts. We want to, but we don't know how to. So right now it's, Andy, I can only think that this person's getting paid in the area where they have the 10:30s and the noons. They're not getting paid for deliveries that are commitment times by 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. So I think that's where there is some confusion. And quite frankly, when the service started in a facility near me, the station and the region couldn't answer what they were getting paid for. Anything you want to add to that, Jeff?
Oh, that's good.
Okay. Next one. Changing the hourly pay is something I've been thinking about for some time. I've been listening. Thank you very much. What experience have your customers had in making this change? I'm anxious about losing drivers, getting the pay right, drivers milking the clock. Even worse, I don't know what else I should be worried about. I'm an efficient operation, 150 stops per route, and I don't want to screw that up. Okay. I can go, Jeff, if you would like. Okay. Drivers want one thing. They want to go home, and they want a fair day's pay. So you can figure out now what they're making in an hourly basis. If somebody's doing 150 stops but they're done by 2:00 and you're paying them, say, $170 a day, and they're only working 6 hours, you're paying that person $28 an hour. And I've had customers say, I can't pay $28 an hour. It's like, you already are. So you want to figure what their hourly rate is, and you do want to be fair. And it's much easier to be fair paying hourly. In the same in one of those operations, we did have a driver making $28 an hour. Meanwhile, we had another driver making about $12 an hour. You say, well, he's slower. Well, maybe his route doesn't allow him to do any more stops. So you kind of want to engineer it backwards. You want to see what you're paying them per hour now. The great thing about it, the more they do, the more they get paid. You know, a lot of people say, well, I could just pay per stop, the more they get paid. Well, what the problem with the per stop rate is, all routes aren't created equal. If you pay everybody $1.25 a stop, and one guy can do 200 stops and one guy can only do 100 stops per hour, you have a pay differential problem. If you worry about people milking the clock, you figure out what they're performing. Like I said, if this guy is doing 150 stops and he's doing it in 7 hours, he's doing 21 stops per hour. You hold them accountable to do 21 stops per hour. If they start to milk it, then guess what? They're held accountable. It is the single reason that UPS has been very effective and able to pay $49 per hour. They manage their driver stops per hour, and they have them on the road 9 hours a day. So it does take, it's a different type of management, but quite frankly, if you were paying per day, a driver could have been milking the clock before anyhow. He could have just said, you know, I can only do 120 stops. And if you want me to do more, you're going to have to pay me more. And lo and behold, he would do 140 stops. You'd pay him more, and he'd still get done at the same time. So he was already milking the clock because he had the glass ceiling that he only wanted to do 120 stops. Did I miss anything, Jeff?
Well, the milking the clock thing doesn't, the folks that make this transition don't necessarily find their driver's milking the clock anymore. I'm just going to tell you, that's just what happens. The other thing is, here's a pro tip. Before you do anything to change anything that has to do with drivers. So let's say you decide you're going to go to 410s or whatever, whatever change you're going to make in a driver's, what they expect to happen every day, change them to hourly, whatever you're going to do. You need to make sure that before you do that, you've got the bullpen full of relief drivers before you go making a change. So if you're going to change to hourly, don't just do it tomorrow. See if you can recruit depending on 20, 25% or more of what you already have for drivers. See if you can recruit some replacements, because guess what happens when you change something? You guys already know. You know what happens. A bunch of them don't like it and they want to go someplace else. Well, pretty soon, as more and more folks start paying by the hour, then they're not going to be able to go anywhere else because everybody else is paying by the hour too. So there's your pro tip there, Kenneth.
Excellent. Next one is how
Hey,
much,
also, Ken,
go ahead.
new people you bring in, start by paying them by the hour. That's a good way to get it started.
Yeah, just if you're going to do it, just the new ones come in. That's how it goes. Well, everybody else getting paid by the day. That's right. Or not.
Excellent point, Bob. How much of the network is currently paying by the day and by the hour? Seneca, do you have that number for our customers?
I don't really have a statistic. I will say that it used to be almost exclusively daily pay, and more we are seeing the conversion to hourly pay.
Yeah. Day pay was done because it was easier, and easier isn't always right. So it's, as we said, start it slow, start with your new hires. But you're going to have to migrate that way. And especially if you're having people in vehicles under 10,000 pounds and you're in states where it's not an option. So can you pay employees a salary instead of hourly? You want that one, Seneca?
Yeah, I can take that. So yes, you can pay a salary. However, it does not exempt them from overtime. So a salary really isn't much different than paying daily, in that you have to do 2 calculations each week and make sure that they're being paid minimum wage. And then you have to make sure that if they worked over 40 hours, that you're paying them an overtime component. That is a calculation that we talked about earlier.
Can laborers be classified as a salary employee? That would be my only concern by certain laws, by certain states.
Right.
Righty, it looks like we had a couple in the chat here also. We already answered that one, What about if you lose multiple drivers at once after you implement that? Well, hopefully Jeff already answered that. If you don't want to implement this all at one time. In fact, when we teach our classes, the wise Gary Wade said, if you're thinking about implementing hourly pay right away, he had a big stop sign up there. So stop. You have to make sure you recruit. You have to make sure you discuss it, and you want to make it comparable for the drivers. If a guy says, well, and you have to have your facts before you do this. You have to tell a guy, listen, you're only working 7 hours a day. I'm paying you $180. 180 divided by 7. That's $25 an hour. Okay. And you have to ask yourself, is that a reasonable wage? It might be. If you're in certain areas, it's too much. And I can tell you, we've got customers in Missouri that pay $14 an hour. And then we have customers in Pennsylvania that are paying $25, $26 an hour. So you have to know your area, what is a good hourly wage. You have to know about what you're paying that driver on an hourly basis now. And the one thing you can't do is increase your payroll through this, because very few, if you go from having 45% of your payroll to revenue, and this takes you up to 55%, guess what? You're not going to be in business very long. So, and it's always an owner's first prerogative to stay in business for their employees. That way they can provide a paycheck for all their employees. So, will you lose some drivers? Probably. As Bob suggested, new hires come in hourly, know what the going rate is, and start to migrate slowly. And you can do it so it's fair for you and it's fair for your employees. Jeff, Seneca, did I miss anything?
No, I
No,
think
just,
you covered it.
yeah, just don't be afraid to do, especially this. Just know that our FedEx is, they're gonna try real hard to get everybody to do this. Right, so start
And
thinking
with-
about doing it.
Yeah, and with the integration, you're going to have to start looking at some part-timers, because the day is extending. It's no longer 8 to 2. It's now probably 7 a.m., 7:30 a.m. till 6:30 at night, maybe even later. So, and you'll have a certain number of stops that you're going to have off the truck by 10:30 in the morning, and you might not be getting dispatched until 9:15 or 9:30. So you might need more resources on the road for the first 4 hours of the day. Well, needless to say, you can't pay somebody a daily rate and only have them work 4 hours a day. So you will end up having to integrate some part-timers, some alternate vehicles into your operation. So paying hourly would be the most logical thing to do. Says, are these issues predominantly P&D? Yes, because line haul, every vehicle is over 26,000 pounds. It's kind of odd if you put 10 P&D people in a room, you're going to get 4 different ways to pay. They're going to pay hourly. They're going to pay per day, or they're going to pay per stop and package, or they're going to pay a day rate with a bonus for stops and packages over a certain threshold. If you put 10 line haul people in a room, you're going to get 20 different ways to pay. It's just the way it is. Some will pay per mile, some will pay per trip, some will pay a percentage of the revenue, some will pay drop and hook, some won't. So, and
Guess
once
what?
again,
Guess
go
what
ahead.
ends up happening?
A lot of people don't know how they're getting paid.
Well, it's that, but usually the path always leads back to it's about the same as you would if you would just pay them by the hour.
Correct. Yes. So, and we do have line haul customers that do pay by the hour. And especially if you're doing spots, I think that's important, because once again, a spot might generate one that does a lot of miles might generate $200 worth of revenue. Meanwhile, you've got one that's in town that's got to go through traffic, and the guy still takes 3 hours to do it. It might only generate for you $50 of revenue. Well, if I'm going to pay a person a percentage of that spot, and it's $25. Now, if he's going to get 50% of $50, it's going to be $25, and it took the guy three hours to do it. You're going to get in trouble there. So, but line haul's been traditionally, if you're doing line haul runs, they get paid per mile. They get a per mile rate. I said some people pay drop and hooks, some people don't. Your drop and hooks can vary by the type of run you doing? Are you just doing a bump where you unhook from a set of doubles at a rest area and swap trailers? Or are you going to a hub where you have to assemble, disassemble, and do all that? So there are different pay challenges in line haul. Once again, our system can help automate that. We are upgrading the gross pay calculator to include some line haul stuff. But even now, you can still put some payroll rules in our system, and it could help definitely speed up the time that you spend processing your payroll. Okay. Anything to add, Jeff?
Nope, good.
Okay. Except P&D and line haul both have challenges. You just have to make sure you're compliant with the laws, utilizing our payroll service. You have experts that you talk with weekly to make sure that you stay compliant with the laws and regulations. It's critical that you do, because an OTC is extremely detrimental to your business, and the prosperity of your business is then taken out of your hands and put back into FedEx's hands. And that's the last thing you want. You don't want them to be able to change your CSA. You don't want them to be able to take runs away from you. Those are things that are detrimental to your business. Okay? So it doesn't look
Hey,
like we
Ken,
have any.
hey.
Go ahead.
Real quick, 22 states had minimum wage go up for 2024. So if I was you, I would check your state, the state that you live in, and see what the minimum wage is. And that way you can, at the very least, know where you're at. You got to know where you're at, or you'll be in trouble.
Absolutely critical, you know that, and something that if you are going to go through a negotiation and you're going to have us help you, that's something that we would want to know, and it's something that you want to communicate to the negotiator, because you do not want to assume that they know that. They should, but you don't want them to assume that they know that your wages have gone up. And normally happens in January. Some states have put it on the ballot. Some states have just already built it in, but more and more states are moving towards a $15 an hour minimum wage. Okay, so I want to thank. Go ahead.
Sorry, just real quick. If you do find that you get an OTC, we can still administer your payroll with Paychex or ADP. So I didn't want you to feel that, if that unfortunately happens, that you're still out in the cold. Even with those two companies, eTruck can still help administer your payroll. We do it right now for several companies. So.
And like I said, we're there for that extra support. All ADP and Paychex is doing is giving you a software program to put it in. It's a little bit irritating that you're paying for this service that they're not going to do anything to keep you out of trouble, where we know we can keep you out of trouble. So I want to thank everybody for your time. I know everybody starts the new year refreshed, ready to go. Sometimes making big changes is scary. There's no doubt about it. But there's no time like the present to take action, change your business, because you're always going to work hard. Let's do some things now to make it compliant, and more so, let's make it more profitable. I bet I can ask everybody on here if they made as much money as they thought they were going to in 2023, and no one's going to raise their hand and say, yep, I made twice as much. It's not going to happen. So take bold action, be smart with taking that bold action, and change the results in 2024 for your business. eTruck Biz is here to help you, support you, and get you through all the changes that FedEx is going to throw at you and force upon you. So with that, we'll be here next Tuesday at the same time, and look forward to everybody having a safe and profitable week. Thank you very much.